You know what's really fun about making content for YouTube? Screwing up 3 times. 3 times before you actually get to the video and it's actually recording and you see that it's recording and you're doing the right thing. Hi, welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. My name is Brandon Watson. I'm an ex-executive from Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, a bunch of startups, some of which you've heard of, some of which you absolutely have not. You know all those interview questions that begin with, tell me about a time when? Well, those are what's called behavioral interview questions, and they've become a mainstay of the interviewing landscape for many roles, especially those when a technical question is not needed, right? You know, dive deep into code stack, etc. And what I have sought to do in all of the mock interviews that I conduct, sign up for your free mock interview at interviewatt.com, is to break down interview segments by leadership principle and press candidates by leadership principle so that they can learn how to better prepare their stories and better prepare themselves for their interview at any company, regardless of whether or not it is Amazon, any of the FANG companies, any company, any role, any level. If you leverage the Amazon leadership principles, I guarantee you, you will perform much, much better in your interview. Today's candidate is a mid-career product management executive, kind of on that cusp between director, not quite senior director, but you know, depending on the company, could be a senior product manager, but definitely director level at a small to mid-size firm. The specific question that I focused on, specific leadership principle that I focused on in this interview segment was customer obsession. And the question was specifically about targeted and pointed customer feedback and how they handle it. In all of the projects that you worked on, sometimes, I mean, not that often with stuff I've worked on, clearly never, but sometimes you get negative feedback from customers and it's pointed and specific that drives an improvement in process or a change in the product, et cetera. So when you think back on, you know, just the last 10 years or so of your career, what's a piece of difficult customer feedback that you had to incorporate into a product, service offering, or whatever? I'm going to jump in here real quick. 2 things. One, I know this candidate, so the joke was a joke that he would understand, and you know, it was a joke between friends. This is a personal friend of mine when I did this interview. 2, if you're liking the content, please like or subscribe. Like the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It lets YouTube know that I'm doing a good job and I'm creating good content, but quite honestly, it lets me know that I'm doing a good job. I did take some time off to rethink the flow of how these videos are going to work so that I could deliver a better product to the viewers. I was getting a lot of really good feedback, and so I've come back, reswizzled. I think I have a much better product, but I would love to hear from you. Leave comments. Is this better than the old videos? Worse? What would you like to see changed? Are there specific questions in customer obsession or even specific leadership principles or specific roles that you'd like to see? I have probably 100 different interviews that I've conducted in the last year, and that number continues to grow. So let's get back to the interview, but like and subscribe, totally appreciate it.
Yeah. We delayed shipment of iPhones. Sorry. You know, if you're an iPhone user, I apologize. One of our customers at Pivotal was TSMC, which is a key component in the supply chain for iPhones.
Really quick. A thing that I harp on a lot with candidates is never assume, never assume that the person that you're interviewing with knows any of the companies that you're going to talk about or even what you did. Never assume that. Always go into it with a teaching mindset and be willing to explain. I mean, most people know in the tech industry anyways what TSMC is, but not everybody does. And I love how he was willing to take that moment and explain, and I kind of said, no, I know what that is, and moved him on. But it's a subtle thing, but it's an important thing. It's very easy to start going down a long-winded answer and not actually explain a bunch of things. And the interviewer is trying to play catch up, and it's too much cognitive load.
And they were telling us the product I was working on at the time was Cloud Foundry at Pivotal. And I was responsible for Windows and .NET support, which was a very small business at the time that I took it over, with like 4 or 5 customers. And we found that like we were getting feedback of this isn't working, it doesn't perform, it crashes all the time, like nothing works. Why did you sell us this thing? Why did you ship this? We should switch back to Apprenda, which was by and large our only competitor. That was hard to hear. It was less hard for me because I was very new to the team. Like this was my 3rd or 4th week at the company. But it was hard to hear for the team.
And what we did was, there's a couple of things to point out here. And as an interviewer, especially as an executive level person on the loop, I absolutely love how this candidate took responsibility for the feedback, despite the fact that he was new to the team. Had nothing to do with the feedback. It really wasn't pointed at him, seeing as he wasn't responsible for it. But he took ownership of it. It's another leadership principle, but he took ownership of it and said he felt it deeply, but he understood he felt it differently than the team would. That's awesome. The only kind of note that I would make is, while he described the team as small, 3, 4, or I think he said 4 or 5 customers, what he didn't really talk about was he didn't help scope it in terms of size relative to the company, right? What's the revenue number? Or how big is this really? Setting boundary conditions with data helps the interviewer understand like what level scale you're operating at. So whenever you're giving an answer, the setup here is very good. If you think about the STAR format, this is a very good setup for the situation, but would have been helped along with some data, but it's not a huge miss. We worked off hours. We got on the phone with Taiwan. We screen shared and worked through individual issues. And I would say like there were 2 things that we changed, broadly speaking. From a technical perspective, we started recommending that our customers not domain join those machines, because the domain join was applying lots of corporate policies that were screwing up all the stuff that we had built, and it was impossible for us to test. Happy to go into the technical solution, but like I don't think anybody cares. The other thing we learned from a process perspective was that expectations with our customers had been set incorrectly. They had been sold a product that was fully mature and ready to go and could handle all their needs, but it was like a V.9, like it was almost a V1, and almost ready to go. So we started resetting expectations. I started having weekly calls with all of our customers. So up to this point, he's laid out a very clear situation and laid out the task. He's got to go fix it. The nuance of the 2 separate items, that's good. It kind of branches where the interview can go, technical or not. But also tying this back to, as a product manager, product owner, you're kind of responsible for shepherding products through development. People kind of point the finger at you because you become the one throat to choke. He's willing to now step into the process. He's stepping into the action. What did he do? And he's starting with what is clearly, obviously, it's the right thing to do, right? Setting up the weekly check-ins, right? Making sure that you are resetting expectations. But as an interviewer, especially a senior level interviewer, what I'm thinking of when I bring someone onto a team is, does this person have repeatable processes that we can leverage within the company, or do I see them mapping to the repeatable processes that we have? Does their brain work that way such that they can be leveraged highly in the frameworks for success that we have either here at the company, or are they going to bring new frameworks? And he's laying out his framework for success, which is it's great. At the time it was 4 or 5, and then it grew, and it became weekly calls with our top 4 or 5 over time, where I was talking to them about our roadmap, what was coming next, their requests, what they'd like to see, challenges they were having, all the stuff. This was with the blessing of the account teams. But having those... Did you catch that? Actually, this is a B shot. Conversations was super helpful. Still have technical difficulties here. To me. Still technical difficulties. What I loved there, it was such... He snuck it in there. Earns trust with the sales team's blessing. Just with the sales team's blessing. That one tiny sentence fragment, it demonstrates so much about this candidate's understanding of what you need to be successful in an organization, especially when you're dealing with unhappy customers. And it was just thrown in there very casually. He didn't make a big deal out of it, but it highlights the importance of the leadership principles. And what we like to talk about with interview at feedback sessions is that, even though you have a question, this is very clearly a customer obsession focused question. Even though you have that question in front of you and you're answering that question, depending on who your audience is, if you can tag your answer with other leadership principles, that shows that, 1, you're giving them content that they're going to resonate with, but 2, that you're kind of a more robust thinker, it just makes you look so much better. And just with sales team support, 4 words, but just so good. To understand like where we should go and what problems we need to solve.
And I think it's a really excellent model for enterprise products. You should know, or I believe that you should know as a PM, who your first 5 users are going to be. Consumer or enterprise, frankly, like you should know who the first couple are going to be. And in enterprise, where that may be a significant percentage of your users, or at least measurable, you should know what they want. And giving a couple of select customers access to the roadmap to understand what's coming, giving them input to the roadmap and letting them like help you shape it, builds trust with the customers. They know what's coming. They know the status of everything and like the dates and if stuff slips and all those things. And it allows them to feel like they have skin in the game so that they do go install the new version right away or like start using the new feature and they give you feedback on it.
So he doesn't come right out and say it. And if you're new to product management or you're trying to understand what it takes to get to the next levels, this is what's called a customer advisory council. Super critical in larger organizations where you have massive enterprise customers to build out your customer advisory council to help give you direction on whether or not you are building the right things for the right people and you truly understand your customer problems. This is definitely high on the customer obsession point of view. However, the one warning is, however, this is a very big company thing to do. It's a very enterprisey thing to do. Now, you might, if you're early on in your product management career and you're trying to build a consumer product, you might call down to customers, pick up the phone, call down one-on-one. If you have small business customers, et cetera, you might not have an advisory council, but certainly having a process by which you are having constant interaction with your customer base where you can float trial balloons as to, hey, we're thinking about this set of features, or we think this set of problems is something you haven't identified yet, but we think is a big problem that we'd like to go solve. Getting that feedback is really important. And the fact that he's talking about it in this way, in so casual way, he's not using kind of the industry buzzwords, but just talking about it as if it's just what he does, lets me know that this candidate does this on a repeated basis and has a high degree of customer obsession.
And that was like an incredibly helpful process change that we made based on having, those early really negative interactions with like TSMC and Boeing was one of our other early negative customers.
So, at the risk of asking a extremely pointed question, but because you weren't the PM responsible for the product, I know I'm not going to offend you. I'm going to offend someone who might be a friend of yours. With so few customers, how the fuck, excuse the language, were they surprised that things didn't work? Like, that to me is, when I hear, early product, only 4 or 5 customers, like there's no excuse for shipping and then being surprised that things don't work. So how did that even happen? So yeah, language aside, this is another one for, product managers. Is like, if you have 4 or 5 customers, you should never be surprised after you ship your product about feedback coming in, unless you have achieved a triple gold medal in the corner case Olympics of breaking software within an organization. But from like a feature functionality standpoint, you shouldn't be surprised when you have 4 or 5 customers. Absolutely should not be surprised. Now, because I know this candidate, I used a bit more colorful language than is normal, but here's why I asked this question. Okay, I don't say it in the interview, but it's really important that you understand that a sly interviewer, an executive level interviewer, what I'm seeking to understand is he going to throw the organization under the bus? What's he going to say? Is he a team player? Or does he suck it up and eat it and not blame other people? What level of ownership is he going to show here? That's really what I'm after. Let's see what happens.
So I'm reading between the lines a little bit. Cloud Foundry is a large, complex product. At the time, the minimum deployment was something like 35 virtual machines in your environment. So like more complex than Kubernetes is today. The product was well established. It was like a year and a half into market, and like was doing $40 million ARR and growing. So these customers were using it for Java applications. When we came in and said, we have a new feature that'll also run Windows applications, it was sold, or they assumed, or probably both, that the Windows quality level was going to be the same as the Java quality level. So it was like an extension or a new vertical within an existing product. So all the existing sales contracts and stuff were already there, like the relationships were there. some combination of assumptions and explicit, misselling of the quality.
I mean, listen, again, this is a lesson for younger, even mid-level product managers or employees of any kind. He didn't throw anybody under the bus at all. That was an extremely diplomatic answer to what was an extremely pointed question. But wow, I mean, really, this is how you say a negative thing in an interview about a former employer without slagging off on that employer, without making it sound like you have an axe to grind, without saying they're a bunch of idiots and I'm so smart and look at me, I'm so smart. This was a fantastic answer.
Got it. And when you say Windows applications, you really mean .NET?
These were actually .NET on Windows.
Yeah.
At the time.
.NET.
Yeah.
This is just a small aside. I get asked from time to time, what's the difference between the types of interviews, the mock interviews I do, and other things that you'll find on YouTube? Well, a couple things. One, there's a couple of mock interviews type things on YouTube. The vast majority of them are kind of broad, general purpose, kind of tell me about yourself. Those aren't helpful at all for anybody going after the kinds of jobs that the people who are seeking out these videos are after. But two, that follow-up question is a key reason, or it was a small follow-up question, but when I asked about .NET, okay? I'm about to break the rule, the thing I just said in the last segment, but it is unlikely that a headhunter or someone who's a lead sourcer for Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever, is going to ask you that follow-up question. Unlikely, because they've never run a team. They haven't worked, well, not never, let's not say that. It is unlikely that they've worked in a product team. It is unlikely that they've worked in a developer role. It is unlikely that they've been in a team environment where they would know enough to ask that follow-up question. And that's really what mock interviews should be, is as real and as close as it gets. And a lot of the follow-up questions I ask are basically, I'm basically interviewing the person as if I was going to hire them. I'm just not going to hire them at the end of this. We're doing a mock interview. But my ability to ask those follow-up questions, I'm drawing on decades of experience as a product leader and as a multidisciplinary manager that allows me to ask the types of questions that they probably won't get from friends running a mock interview, as well as tying a bunch of points together from throughout the interview, drawing on my decades of industry experience and saying, well, what about this? Or, hey, this is what I would normally see in an organization this size. So that's why it's I don't know, it's why I think I'm doing something helpful and different.
Okay.
Today it's .NET on Linux a lot of times. So
yeah, fair. I'm trying to think. I'm mixing questions I had. Okay.
So in terms of the customer advisory board, which is what I'll call it, it sounds like this was a new process for your company. If I'm wrong, tell me, but how did you get buy-off on a customer advisory council?
I didn't. I just did it.
Love the bias for action. Love it.
So one of my favorite parts of this role at Pivotal was that I was the only PM in New York when I started. I was working on Windows, which meant that literally no one wanted to talk to me because nobody cared. Because, Silicon Valley is a little Linux focused, right? Nobody likes Windows. I saw that as an incredible opportunity because for internal LOB applications, it's something like 40% of the market. It's a huge, huge market. So I thought that was great. Nobody bothered me. I got to do my own thing. What I did do was clear it with each of the account teams for the accounts that I wanted to include, and made sure that they were involved in the process because I don't want to piss off enterprise account teams.
Yep.
When my boss found out, I didn't call it a cab or anything. I called it I'm having regular calls with a couple of customers, each individually. So they didn't know about each other. And it didn't even cross his radar as a thing to worry about. So I just kind of went for it.
In all of the it's funny. In prepping for these videos, I basically am pulling from a drive where I've got the videos that I've masked, that I've been able to do that work with in post-processing. I hadn't watched any part of this interview prior to coming into this because I wanted to have my natural reaction but I also have the notes in front of me that I took during the interview. And I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed this interview with my friend, because it's just, there's so many good parts to this. But I think what I'm going to focus on as a kind of closeout here is, as a product manager, you have a responsibility to manage across an organization. Oftentimes you are leading without direct managerial control. And so your ability to display that you earn trust is super important. Your ability to take ownership and have a bias for action, for problems and solving them, super important. And having a high degree of customer obsession, meaning you understand your customer problems, you're willing to listen to your customers, you take the hard inputs, you process it, and you make a better decision about what you're going to go do, is central to your job. And in this one answer, which spanned about, 10 minutes talking time, this candidate, mid-career product manager, demonstrated an executive maturity that was, quite frankly, higher than normal. Did a great job. This was just a great answer. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But as a teaching tool for anyone looking to, how do you conduct yourself in an interview? How do you present complex topics? How do you talk about a company that didn't perform well without throwing them under the bus? And how do you demonstrate various leadership qualities that's expected of a product manager? This candidate did an outstanding job. Okay, so that is it for this week's video. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you and helpful and taught you something. Again, if you find this content valuable, please go ahead and click that like button. I think the cool kids say, no, my son would hit me if he would give me a smack if I said that. So what does he say? Smash that like button, but he doesn't actually say that. He says it to annoy me because, well, that's what 14-year-old boys do. But if you like the content, let YouTube know that we're doing a good job here, and I'm going to keep pushing out these videos. If you'd like to have your own very free and very personalized mock interview, please go to interviewatt.com, sign up there, and always feel free to reach out an email. Let me know how I can help you. Leave comments if there's things you would like me to focus on. I love hearing from all of you. I love hearing when these folks get jobs, and this candidate did actually ultimately get the job that he was seeking. So it all ended well. Have a great day.